So yeah, it's been awesome to join the Graduate Interaction Design Program. This is year 3 of working with Maggie and Julian and the team on helping prepare you guys for leadership in the world of interaction design. Um, my start here in LA and the overall creative realm was back in the architecture world. I came out from Louisiana and started studying architecture, and about halfway through, I decided to try to stay in LA for the summer and get a summer job, and ended up working with a lot of Hollywood projects in the terms of the set design and overall kind of production support, from music videos to television commercials to kind of television shows and specials. And it was quite intense, but I got introduced to the idea of world building. And a lot of the folks that I was working with were actually kind of art center community members. And I was at the time, after graduating from architecture school, working with a big corporate firm on things like a environmental protection agency tower in Sacramento, or things in China and so forth that you see here on screen. And the prospect of digging into art center and really soaking in as much as I possibly could was really attractive. And so I segued into the grad program, and there I really got deep into digital. And I'd taken quite a few classes at USC, but there were not the same kind of approaches and kind of holistic mindset around what we called at the time transmedia. And so the vision was that we were taking on pretty much any creative assignment and looking at authorship from the lens of the experiential aspect of whatever that might end up in its final form factor being, that we could work with team members and or through ourselves, particularly with all the different digital tools that were emerging from the world of motion graphics and product design to digital and web and all the things, right? And this mandala kind of design is something that really kind of coalesced a lot of the activities that were in the kind of remit of things that we were being asked to do as students as well as professionals. So coming out of grad ID, I landed in a boutique down in La Jolla that was run by an Art Center alum who had done a lot of really great high-end photography and video-based advertising work with some fantastic photographers, several of which that were also Art Center alums, like Matthew Ralston, but also David LaChapelle, and quite a roster of really great folks. And I stepped in as kind of the person to help the agency at the time, which was about 70 people, really get to grips on digital. This is around 2006. And some of the work was, again, really fantastic. I was helping build out a digital practice area with 3 or 4 guys, and then we were constantly trying to recruit. But we had some fantastic clients over the long haul. So Campari, which owns Sky Vodka, which also introduced us to LVMH, was a fantastic client to work with, and we did some great work with them. The SLS Hotel Group, we did some really fantastic broadcast and photography and print work with them. Tacori, which is still an up and coming, but basically kind of a competitor to Tiffany's, based here in Glendale. They really kind of gave us the support and the aegis to push forward on giving them an iconic kind of cinematic look and feel. We also helped launch Fisker, the first go around for Henrik. Really loved my time with Henrik. He was a great guy, still is, I think. But we had some great times looking at the Karma, and it had its own trajectory, of course. But we were also doing things with Hitachi and a few other really great brands. So it was just a really sweet kind of visual-driven brand development group that we were working with. And so I was really pushing the digital as well as concepting on some of the photo shoots, this is something that Matthew Ralston shot for us here in LA. And we were trying to introduce Campari to the American palette, which was a bit complicated, but I think it's over the long haul starting to succeed. As mentioned, we did a lot of really great work with Henrik and team on building out a whole platform around what we're now calling kind of the future for sustainability. And their whole vision was leveraging all kinds of reclaimed elements as well as new and smarter kind of material deployments. So it was a ton of fun to work on that, and we had a really great array of broadcast and um, you know kind of hybrid media that we were building out across all the different brands. And so a lot of the positioning and the storytelling around the brands was landing and based on really deep research and really deep user persona definition. And so a lot of the brands that we were working with came and were attracted to that boutique because of the level of rigor that we had around the kind of ownership of their brand image. And so the advertising, obviously, since the 2010s, has really kind of continued to spiral into some different spaces. But it was a ton of fun to work on all kinds of really great productions and the digital components and complement to the content that we were producing there. So I was also, as I mentioned, building up a practice area, and I would come up to Art Center from La Jolla and try to convince at the time folks in graphics and advertising and illustration and motion to come and move to San Diego, and the prospect of actually working on some of these brands was intriguing, but they weren't interested particularly in digital at the time. So we're talking the 2006, 2010, 11 timeframe. So at the time, Brian Boyle said, "Hey, you're basically telling me that my students are not attracted to what you're doing. I think they need you in the classroom to actually show them why they should be attracted to considering digital." And so I started teaching in the fall of 2010, and up until probably the spring of 2014, I taught interaction design 1, as well as with the advertising department, as it was called back then, rich media digital advertising, aka how to make banner ads not be the end of your career, as well as advertising ethics, which was a really unique proposition. Every time I would mention that name to people, they would laugh. But the premise was something that actually informs what we're doing in design and strategy and leadership now, where we really talk about the real politic of what it's like to work inside of an agency or inside of a consultancy or inside of a startup. And I also had time with some of the startup, some of the sponsored projects in Design Matters. So we did a really great course with initially the United Nations UNFPA program, which was about kind of childbirth, kind of understanding and awareness. We also got swept into a really great project with Dr. Lucy Jones on tsunami awareness through the U.S. Geological Service. And then lastly, with the Homeboy initiative that we did in 2014. So some really great things happened there. Meanwhile, I left the agency and moved back to LA and was working with ABC Television and helped with running and setting up their digital department on some of the shows that were launching at the time, like Scandal and a few other things. And there were all these dynamics that I just didn't know behind the scenes around how the digital kind of avenues that go along with the shows and the whole portfolio of ABC and ABC Family and the Oscars and so forth all worked. But I did discover a few things and started experimenting a bit with stories. Meanwhile, I got asked to do some consulting with David Lynch and his editor on several of his films, Duwayne Dunham. And they had a project that they wanted to see if I could do something as a digital kind of outsider with. And I ended up getting them financing for the film, which is finally, after 5 years, gonna actually come out. But it was done through a group that was part of ConsenSys called SingularDTV. And I was also exploring and processing, my relationship with my older brother, who's a banker, around the prospect of what if there was a workplace kind of office-like comedy. And so I was really kind of exploring how I could become a better storyteller by taking screenwriting classes. And so this is one of the outputs of that. while researching this project, I discovered this whole world of alternative currencies that has existed for quite a while. And again, this is around 2010, just after Bitcoin had really started to surface. And the class that I was teaching with the advertising department, they were my experimental subjects, where I asked them to rebrand Bitcoin and to rebrand the prospect of what Bitcoin could be outside of the things that we were hearing about, which were true, things like Silk Road and so forth that were a bit problematic, let's say. What could we do around people's understanding of what Bitcoin could be? And they hated me for it, right? They really did not like Bitcoin in 2010, 2011, 2012. But this prospect of alternative currencies was really powerful. And it came to life when I got introduced to a group that's been here in LA now 50 years called the SBCC is their acronym, but it's strength-based community change. And it was started by some folks who moved from San Francisco in the 70s and started in the Manhattan Beach area. Now they're in Wilmington, but they're effectively about a 100-person social services group. And their vision is around empowerment. And so we've done several cycles of rebranding and kind of product development. We're doing some work right now. But their latest kind of, let's say, presence was something we did in 2021, where we really wanted to map out just how much activity they have throughout the 88 cities in LA County. There's a lot of different things that they're connected to and that they provide access to. And they've got 5 divisions that help focus on, whether it's kind of personal support, if people need lawyers or therapists or their kids. During COVID, they actually had preschool infrastructure for them to leverage and use. So just a lot of really great resource activation for LA County. And this is taking a while to come up here, but basically right now what they're doing is they've got an extension of a program that they started in 2022 around universal basic income through LA County as an experiment. And so that actually activated some of the things that I've been doing with, kind of studying the world of alternative currencies and so forth. But right now they've been commissioned by LA County to actually work with the foster care division of the Department of Family Children Services around a 2,500 person pilot for post foster care empowerment. So effectively people that are 18 to 22, they have a stipend that they're given every month, and SBCC helps facilitate that through a debit card, as well as other infrastructural services that they don't know that they're entitled to. And so part of that is actually kind of building out a full supporting infrastructure that will allow people that they have on their team called coaches to interact with the foster care youth. And California has the most foster care participants in the country. It's massive. And so we're doing a lot around digitizing their methodologies, leveraging AI for all the different functions, but also giving them access to the resources directly through portals that we'll be building out in the fall. So I'll also segue over to talking about the world of digital ventures that really emerged from the relationship that some great people in grad ID and product and kind of, I would say, just general design got into by freelancing with some McKinsey guys. My experience with the McKinsey and BCG and Accenture and other consultancies prior to being asked to come and consider working with them was not great. And I always looked at them as kind of adversaries, particularly coming from the marketing and a few other categories of work that I was doing with clients. But this was a different scenario where Boston Consulting Group was effectively really setting a new precedent for themselves as well as the industry. That around that time, 2013, 14, there was a lot of transformation and foundry and other kind of visions of actually bringing in the builders to the table with the leadership of these companies and saying, actually, we're not just going to give you a 400-page PowerPoint deck. We're actually going to connect you with the guys that are on our team who actually can build this stuff for real and actually really launch it. And then you can decide whether you want to bring it in-house or you want to have it become a startup that you support. So I was brought in on the right to really kind of help them as a designer around their methodology and their identity system. We wanted to, and the CEO of BCG wanted us to have a very different identity and ideology, frankly, than the core consulting team. A lot of work was done around who we recruited and why. They always remarked when they came by from the other offices throughout BCG just how not just diverse, but just frankly drastically different the profile was, and they've continued to adapt and assimilate that in. So we ended up rebranding BCG as part of our remit at the very start of digital ventures, and that was like going to your grandparents' home and redesigning and then rebuilding their house. You can imagine how friction filled that would be, but we got it done. But we were also doing the work to build a new brand for digital ventures itself, and the recruiting and the infrastructure around that, and the career pathways and professional development frameworks. And my remit was around the product design and the communication design cohorts. At the time of probably year 3, that was about 100 people here in LA. So that's where all my hair went. But we did a lot of really great systems design for them too, in terms of setting up the infrastructure for the brand to work across 9 offices, which is what we ended up with, right? And so that was a ton of fun. We had large scale transformation projects like Lego. That was fascinating to watch and to be within and to work with for about 2.5 years, where Lego was quite balkanized in terms of the different locations, but as well as the overall e-commerce engine. So we did a lot of consulting level work to really unify them around visions that they had, as well as actually doing the heavy lifting on really designing what you now see at lego.com. We had other really great clients, like Starbucks, for instance, that was really open-minded about kind of exploring what rewards and loyalty programs could be. And so we ended up building infrastructure that became its own new venture that launched outside of BCG. It's now been bought back and so forth. But the idea was that we were effectively using AI around the data sets. And so they had a whole practice area around all the data that was coming through from the millions of customers that Starbucks has, and the value proposition around using that data in a smart way and delivering really great personalized offers for them was fun to work with. So yeah, it's probably, I don't know, something like 150 ventures that in my 6 years of being there, I was a part of and helping guide and really do some great work there. We had phenomenal motion graphics folks. I got lucky with about six of the folks that I had both as students as well as people that were recommended by the school. And so we had a full-on art center mafia going. But the work was fantastic, and we really have a strong community that continues to this day based on the shared language and dialogue we had from our time at Art Center and all the different types of projects that we were exploring. No one had any fear about jumping in and doing something really interesting and or challenging around what we were doing there at DB. So it's also a place where I could apply some of the interests I had around blockchain. So at that time, around 2016, 17, the notion was that the corporates were starting to really get interested, but be fearful of regulatory and other headwinds, which was legitimate concern. But we started to work with some companies and entities that were bold, and DeBeers was one. And they really had a vision around wanting to evolve their both brand positioning around the kind of diamond mining issues, let's call it. Um, and so the vision was that they would build a consortium as the kind of majority and or largest incumbent in the industry sector of diamonds and mining and so forth. They brought in the minority kind of groups as well. And we built a two-sided system for them. One was on the provenance tracking of the actual diamonds themselves, and the other one was for the workforce and proving who they were, how they get paid. And we built all that using Ethereum at the time. But it was a major endeavor and is still running. It's now run by a team out of the London office there. There's some other folks involved too, but it's still a really great case study on the leverage of provenance infrastructure for high value artifacts. Another one that was fun that happened also about a year later was with the World Wildlife Fund, where we worked on food provenance and particularly around the issues with regard to, we started with the harvesting of fish in the Southern Pacific. And the vision was that there was a whole methodology around how to kind of set up the supply chain and the proof of how the harvesting actually occurred and the certificate effectively that went with each harvest. And so now they spun from using that for kind of world of fishing and a few other categories to pretty much most of the kind of grocery store items there in the South Pacific. So Australia is heavily using it and a few other countries in South Pacific. And it was and is a fun one to look back on and kind of see what we're doing there. We also were working with the early stage versions of what's now known as the Internet Computer Protocol. And this was a gentleman, Dominic Williams, who would come and work with us on the strategy side or the hackathons that we were doing around blockchain and how to use it and integrate it into business. But he finally actually launched his platform in, I think it was May of 21. But the big vision effectively that spun out of his relationship with the Ethereum ecosystem was that the concept of a world computer required you to actually build a full-on data center network. And that's what he spent his time doing. And he's finally gotten that together. That then enables you to actually run sovereign AI. That enables you to have self-writing internet capability of having the conversation with something like Caffeine AI, which is coming out soon. But it also allows you to have huge amounts of storage in a very inexpensive way so that you can actually create digital twins of things that you're digitizing. So around 2018, I got asked to work with Upfront Ventures on Valence, and that was really about the prospect of working with the Sand Hill Road groups, which are basically the venture capital firms as well as their portfolio companies, and helping them build out a talent foundation for finding the elusive ones, let's call them, right? Whether we started with the African American community, but it was eventually going to segue over to other sectors that representation was just not succeeding with in terms of the companies that were hiring talent, that they wanted to find people that were, you know, at the height of their capabilities, but also able to bring that different perspective. So we ended up, you know, having a couple of rounds and bringing in some really interesting and or dynamic other partners for Upfront in the name of like SoftBank, my former firm, BCG, B Capital Group is their venture capital team that I helped build out their brand and so forth. And we ended up exiting, in my opinion, a bit prematurely in summer of 22 to a company called Greenwood Bank. And the idea was there that they had bought a Soho House physical social network called the Gathering Spot, and that they wanted to blend the digital platform that we had built with that. Um, and it, it got complicated, but we did have fantastic things. We did a really great event pretty much the week before the world changed with COVID at the museum here in LA, and had some great, we did a photo shoot. We did all kinds of really fantastic content and got some great press. But a lot of learning is from there still to this day in terms of building community and the interactions and the design around that. I was also starting to have a really great relationship build, and still to this day, I count them as great friends with the city of Boston. The mayor of Boston at the time, a guy named Marty Walsh, actually reached out when we launched and said, "Hey, we'd love to work with you guys in some interesting way, across cities, and would you be interested?" And I said, "Of course. I think Boston is a phenomenal place, and definitely has a lot of challenges around diversity and so forth, but there's some really great people there." So on the left was is a venture capital group that spun out of that dialogue called Visible Hands. They're still going. They have a cohort model around women and other underrepresented folks getting a really great experience around incubating some of their products. And then on the right is the Institute for Nonprofit Practice that I got introduced to. And so we've done some really great stuff with them and continue to as they scale out across the country. The next stepping stone was joining my friends from Digital Ventures again. So the partner that was the lead on the DeBeers work, he had partnered up with some folks over in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, to activate the Internet Computer's capabilities around provenance at scale, meaning working with a lot of the luxury brands that are based there, from the watch world to the fine art worlds, as well as general high-end collectibles. And I was asked to lead the digital media sector here in Los Angeles. But the big vision was that there was physiometric capture of artifacts through a very rigorous museum-like approach of intake. So we would actually have almost, kind of a set of photography types from infrared to, 8 to 10 megapixel shots that were done in a studio format around a watch, for instance. And that the authentication process would take place through really microscopic physiometric level detail being confirmed or denied by the AI that was backing that. And that then could apply to pretty much any artifact of any sort, right? The digital media side, the vision at the time, and again, this is 21, 22, was that we were going to work with newly generated or brand new product and asset releases, as opposed to legacy artifact things. So there was a conversation and or an exploration around things like estates with universal music. And it was just so complicated to deal with that. And so the focus became, hey, let's start with the new world of things that are being created, as opposed to going back into the music archives and dealing with all the morass of rights and so forth. But the mission was to really protect humanity's greatest assets, right? That was the big vision and how we would deal with that. And so we had all the layers and the stack of elements that you could leverage that with once you've actually captured the twin and you've built it out, and it's now locked into a authenticated form. And so marketplaces, the process of tokenization and minting, wallets, and even governance, we were covering all that space with what we were doing. And, again, the vision was that if you had a, iPhone 12 and above, that the cameras and the systems could have an app that would activate and be able to authenticate and so forth. I'm gonna accelerate a little bit through here because there was a lot of stuff that we did. From the box on the left, which was a kind of, let's call it a studio in a box, right? Where groups like OpenSC and eBay and so forth, we were working with them to have this box that could be in a dealer and or vault, and they could put the watch or the piece of jewelry inside, close it, and take the photos at the extreme high level with all the lighting controls that they need to have it be, I call it physiometric. You see biometric here. We had lots of debate about that word. But the idea of that singular artifact being captured. And so when we were working with fine art, for instance, we had several pilots with folks like a guy by the name of Jean Bogosian, who's based in Brussels. His work is all about kind of fire and markings. We had a whole process of how we would catalog that, how we would capture that with the photography, and how we would display that with the certificate, and where that would live, and how that would sit on the internet computer and be accessible, but also protected. And there was an app that went along with that was effectively a passport that had all kinds of entitlements if you were either a whole owner or a fractional owner of some of the work that was coming through. So the tokenization process, we had a whole kind of infrastructure set up for that, particularly for the watch companies and the fine art gallerists who could take this kind of almost ERP dashboard kind of infrastructure and apply it at scale to their operations. I ended up segueing probably early 22 over to actually becoming a full-fledged product manager. The digital media aspects were inherent in what we were doing, but they needed me to kind of step in and help manage the build out of the software as a service platform. And so we had a whole design team that I was working with that I brought in, who we were helping kind of guide the engineers towards a really great product that is still live and running today, again, for the clients of Origyn. But from the side of kind of, let's call it retail, they could see like a marketplace on the right there, or the side of the International Gemological Institute that wanted to use it because they were running what we called a node at the time, and they wanted to manage 5 million records of diamonds. We built out a lot of really cool infrastructure there. And we also had a media platform that was effectively kind of a YouTube channel kind of destination that we built out that had everything tokenized and all that fun stuff. And so there was just a lot of product coming through, whether it was Muhammad Ali's gloves to high-end watches to Keith Haring paintings to Paul Frank, who I'm talking about in just a second, to some NBA Hall of Famers, to great photography and great kind of illustration work. We had a lot of really great things that were coming through. I also was really driving the whole definition of, believe it or not, users are actually going to need to be accommodated here. And so thinking through who were the user personas that we were really catering to and what were we really building for them was a big initiative that I was helping drive. So that was a lot of fun to really kind of define who we were targeting and who we were trying to work with, and interviewing them and working with them. So again, we got a chance to apply some really great aspects of the protocol and the infrastructure to the different artists and corporates that we were working with. And I started to segue back to focusing what we could do here in the US. Again, this is early 23 when a lot of the regulatory winds got, let's say, very intense. And so we kind of segued over to kind of focusing on the American application, while the Swiss team started to just roll out with groups like Metalor. And there's a gold-backed physical bar offering that they now have, as well as a stable coin that's backed by gold bars. It's Switzerland, so in a vault somewhere connected to digital stuff. It's Swiss, but it's really cool, and they're doing some really interesting stuff in terms of having a very strong uh, connection to the physical artifact and the digital certification process and verifiability of it all. So that's where Sublime Digital came to life, where the idea of having those original kind of relationships with some of the brand world actually start to leverage this capability. And one of the things that we also set in motion was working with a consortium out of Rome called Feder Italy, which is effectively a way to certify goods that are coming from Italy, particularly food. If you're tracking this last couple of years, there was a whole thing around Italy's kind of stance on making sure that there would not be a degradation of their food culture and their food products. And so this was a play around that. And so they use the Internet Computer and Origyn protocol to certify through a set of effectively notary publics on the processes and the genesis and kind of status of the actual products that are coming out. And so there's a group that I've been working with this last probably September to now on a olive oil first, and then there's other products that are coming out. They're based here in the US, but they ship out of southern Italy. The bottle has been manufactured by another Swiss group, and we've got an RFID aspect to the bottle and how that will actually be activated. But they're really very discerning about the production process of their olive oil and the farms that they're working with and so forth. And it's been really fun to kind of see how to use the protocol and what we were doing with Feder Italy. So again, as I mentioned, there's an RFID that the bottle manufacturer is setting up on there. So superposition. And that is kind of effectively my venture studio, where groups like my friend Frank, that I've known since probably 2010. Seemed like everything happened in 2010, but no, nonetheless, Paul has been a fantastic friend. He's actually been an instructor up at Art Center as well. But he is a really fun, interesting person who unfortunately had the tragic kind of artist situation unfold where probably 2007 or so, he and his partners split, and that meant that the brand that he had built with Julius and so forth ended up getting sold into Saban Entertainment. They wanted to do animations, but it meant Paul might get separated from it, which he did. But then it all came back together in 2020 when some of the folks who used to work with him bought the brand out of Australia, and he now helps creative direct that. But it's still not the same. And so he and I have been talking about effectively building a new brand with new characters that become agents, AI agents. But you wouldn't interact with them as you would a typical AI agent. But he's also going to have fine art gallery shows, which you can kind of see here. He loves to do these handcrafted sculptures and other things that he wants to sell there. But he's got a great brand legacy that continues to sell product, and people love his worlds. He's got a big footprint in several places throughout Asia, Middle East, and he's doing a cafe in Dubai and so forth. But this world of Banjo Land that we're creating right now around these 7 new characters, some of the familiar older ones will show up too, but each of these characters, as I mentioned, is going to be an agent. They all meet in this little time kitchen, eating pancakes and tell stories and go on animated adventures. But the idea is that these are going to be tokenized physical artworks as well as digital and physical products. And so there'll be all kinds of fun stuff from this list of pretty much every type of accessory and essential apparel good that you might imagine, but it'll all be done in his signature style and fun and be tokenized. Okay, I'm almost, all right, so another 5 minutes or so. Another group that I'm working with right now is a group called Hyperion Motors. And so Hyperion's a hydrogen energy focused, how to put it, force. They've been around for about 11 years. They're based in Orange and in Columbus. The founder is a CCS grad, but he's got a lot of Art Center people in his infrastructure and team there. But the vision is to actually activate hydrogen energy capabilities at scale, but also in a very dramatic way alongside some really great products. And so his first release that he's been focused on for a while now is the XP1, which is a pretty insane hypercar. So it's about a 1,500 horsepower hydrogen fueled crazy thing. And the idea was to take these technologies out of NASA, because they work with a lot of the NASA centers to actually apply their patents. And there's several former NASA people on the team, that they're taking space technology and applying it to the world of energy and mobility. And so there's some fun things that we're working on right now in terms of taking this charging infrastructure that he has and applying that to the world of kind of collective economics, right? That there could be access to equity and access to transactional flow around this, for instance, charger system that works for both hydrogen vehicles as well as standard EV vehicles. So they've got some great partners that they're working with, Shell and so forth, as well as a lot of really great work with Red Bull right now and some of the other groups that are going to help manufacture, including Bugatti. And then their facilities in Orange and in Columbus are operating pretty heavily right now. I'm working with helping launch a lifestyle and community kind of e-commerce world. There's only going to be 300 units of this vehicle that are manufactured over the next 5 years. But there's other things in the queue that are going to come through. But there's a whole community around that where they go up to, all the different car shows, whether it's the Monterey car show or some of the things over in the EU. But on the right there's this whole leverage around the internet computer that we're going to be doing for his platform, and some of the customers and how they plug into the infrastructure. And so the last thing I'll mention to you is something that I'm working on also around the world of educational endowments. So this is something that I started looking at probably, I would say, 2020. Art Center is just a fantastic community and ecosystem, but there's always been the dialogue around the endowment kind of challenge. I went to USC for undergrad and that world of endowment and so forth, but then there are the other groups that I think there's interesting opportunities with leveraging some of the capabilities of collective economics and blockchain and Web3 and so forth. So particularly the art and design world. So the vision was, or is, inspired by Marcus Aurelius around the idea of the endowment model, and particularly around the work product that's coming out of folks like you all here on this Zoom, right? The students, the faculty, the institution overall, that there's incredible IP opportunities. And if there were, infrastructure to tokenize that and have a marketplace around that, it could be pretty fantastic. And so I'm working on this in terms of looking at the, the factors that would go into actually creating this and installing it as something that people could actually really leverage. This idea or this phrase around what we now call real world assets is quite fungible in terms of whether it's a financial asset like a stock or a bond, but it can also be a physical good or artifact. And depending on what you want to do with it thereafter, it gets really interesting. And so lots of different categories, thinking through the idea of some of the products that come out of our world here at Art Center, over to some of the things that are coming out of different technology transfer aspects of different institutions. This is just a lot of really cool things that are possible. So working on that one, it's a beast. But it is a thing that for institutions I think is pretty potential latent. So that's it.